And now we're going to hear from Eva Szepesi, a survivor of the Holocaust. She was 12 years old when she was freed from the Auschwitz death camp.
Ja. Sehr geehrte Frau Bundestagspräsidentin Bas.
President of the Bundestag, Ms. Bas, Mr. President of Germany, Mr. Steinmeier, members of the Bundestag, ladies and gentlemen. It is a real honor for me to be able to speak here to you today. I am very pleased that you have invited my daughters, granddaughters, and great-grandchildren, that they can all be here. I'm so glad you're all here. You give me so much strength and so much love. You exist because 79 years ago, on the 27th of January 1945, I was liberated by the Red Army in Auschwitz-Birkenau as a 12-year-old. But let me start from the beginning. My name is Eva Szepesi. I was born on the 29th of September 1932 as Eva Diamond in a suburb of Budapest. I had a happy childhood with my loving parents and grandparents and my little brother, Tomasz, until I was 6 years old. Then, in 1938, the race laws of the Nazis came into force in Hungary too, and then the discrimination against the Jews in everyday life really began. I had to give in my pets. They were taken from me because I was Jewish. I wasn't allowed to go into public swimming pools anymore because I was Jewish. I felt the exclusion I was exposed to in my school, even from my best friends, only because I was Jewish. In front of our building, there was a lovely old water pump. I played there with my friends a lot. One day, I was 8 years old at the time. I went through our garden perfectly happily, and then I was a bit surprised to see that two of my friends were holding a piece of raw meat that was bloody, and they were holding it under the water of the pump. One of them turned around then suddenly and saw me. "What are you staring at, you Jew?" he said to me. And I stared at him. And then one of my best friends called out to me and said, "Yeah, you look at this, actually, just like this bloody piece of meat. The blood of your father will soon be flowing." My father, who walked up to me then, saw the tears in my eyes. He hugged me closely. "I know," he said, "your best friends. That really hurts. Someone has incited them against us. They're not to blame themselves." In 1942, my father had to go to the Jewish labor service, the Munkasalot, as it was called. He didn't get a uniform, He only had a yellow armband that showed that he was Jewish. He was tormented and had to work in awful conditions. I never saw him again. On the 19th of March, 1944, the Germans occupied Hungary. I noticed that my mother was very anxious, and my auntie Piri as well. Since 1943, our aunt had lived with us since she'd fled from Slovakia. The fact that my grandparents and other family members since 1942 had been deported and murdered from Slovakia was something I only found out many, many years later. On the 5th of April, we had to wear a yellow star. That was mandatory. One day, my mother pulled me close and said to me that Auntie Piri and myself were going to secretly cross the border into Slovakia. She told me I should pretend that I was deaf and mute. When I was saying goodbye to her on the train station, my mother hugged me so tightly that I could hardly breathe. Her eyes had teared up. I didn't understand why she was so sad about this goodbye, because she'd said that she was going to be following soon. And I quickly hugged my little brother Tomasz as well before I got onto the train. I had no idea that this was the very last time I was going to see either of them. Fleeing over the border was very, very dangerous. After we'd survived that trip, my aunt had to leave me in the hands of strangers. I lived with 2 older sisters at the end, and I kept waiting every single day for a sign of life from my mother, in vain. I felt reasonably safe until the night when I was woken by loud banging. There was shouting of men, which penetrated every room in the flat. Pack up, come with us. I got dressed, crying, and then I went into the living room and saw 3 men in uniform. Suddenly, I realized that I'd forgotten my doll Erika in bed, but I wasn't allowed to go and get her. They brought us into a Jewish home for the elderly, from which transports went to Seret, an assembly camp, every day. And from there, I was deported with the last transport. It was a packed freight train, and there was hardly any air. I was hungrier with every hour, and more afraid. Suddenly the train stopped. The freight train doors were ripped open. Lights blinded us. We heard SS men shouting, men with leather whips, and we heard the loud barking of the German Shepherd dogs as well. The wind was ice cold. I stood there on the 2nd of November, shivering. It was 1944, on the ramp in Auschwitz-Birkenau. I had no idea then that my mother and my 7-year-old brother Tomasz had arrived there 4 months before me and were gassed upon arrival. We were marched into a building where we had to strip naked. I had a blue jacket on, the blue jacket that my mother had knitted for me, and I couldn't bear to take it off. Take it off. So I took the jacket off and folded it carefully next to me on the floor. The guard stormed up to me and she kicked my jacket to one side. I tried to stop the tears. Then a woman came up to me with scissors in her hand. Without breaking stride, she started cutting my braids off and threw them on a big pile of hair. And then she got a razor and took all the rest of my hair off. I felt as if my last protection had been taken from me. The next morning came registration. We were driven from the barracks very early in the morning out into the snow. I was completely shocked by everything. Suddenly, a female camp guard stood next to me, and she whispered to me in an energetic voice, "You are 16 years old, and don't pretend you're any younger than that." But I was only 12. Was I supposed to lie? I was pushed along and was standing in front of one of the tables. Name? Eva Diamant, I whispered. Age? I hesitated, and then I said 16. And then a number was tattooed on my left arm. I was number A 21,877. We stood outside for hours in the roll calls, in the appalls. My fingers and toes froze. And then there was the mistreatment. I got weaker and weaker, and I just lay on my cot. One day, I realized that the Germans were driving all of the inmates together out. Get up, stand in a row, march, out. I just stayed on my cot. I had no strength to respond. And then suddenly everything went quiet in the barracks. Next to me, there were a number of women. They didn't move. They were dead. I don't know how long I lay there. But at some point, I felt a hand on my lips that were feverish, and the hand was feeding me snow. I began to focus and saw that there was a Russian soldier smiling over me. And the human warmth in his eyes and his smile did me good. It was the 27th of January, 1945, and I was alive. After being treated in the field hospital and slowly regaining my strength, on the 18th of September, 1945, I reached Budapest, hoping that my family would be waiting for me.
My
uncle found me on one of the lists of the survivors from the camp and came and got me. He saw that I was looking for my mother, and he said to me, transports keep coming with new people. We'll wait. At 17, I met my husband, Eva Szepesi. He had also lost most of his family in the Shoah. We married, and in 1952, our first daughter, Judith, was born. Then my husband was sent to Frankfurt by the Hungarian trade representation for 2 years. In 1956, there was the revolution in Hungary, and we couldn't go back, so we stayed in Germany. 1964, our second daughter, Anita, was born. We opened a shop and slowly got used to our lives in Germany. For 50 years, I did not speak about what happened to me. And then I slowly started to write it down. When I read, many students in schools ask me, how can you live in the land of the perpetrators of these crimes? I said, it's my fate. In the beginning, I was very afraid of being here. But I cannot hate. I received too much love as a child to do that. Every day, I think of my murdered family, and I often wonder why I survived. It has become the meaning of my life to speak for all of those who can no longer speak. Thus, I stayed here to tell these stories. And believe me, it is not easy at the age of 91 to stand here and speak to you. But if I can reach even a few people with my words, then it's all been worth it.
You got the music or?
I am grateful for the valuable work of the many Jewish organizations. For example, the Jewish Claims Conference, which protests the relativization and denial of the Holocaust, or the meeting point for survivors of the Shoah, which is a protected space of the Central Welfare Organization of Jewish people in Germany. For the second and third generation of the Shoah, unfortunately, this is still necessary. And then came the 7th of October, the day on which the most lethal attack on Jewish people since the Shoah occurred, the day on which the terrorist organization of Hamas murdered children, parents, and grandparents in an atrocious manner, just because they were Jewish. The day on which the Hamas raped young women who were dancing at a festival and murdered them and took them hostage, and men as well. My granddaughter, who also lives in Israel, could have been one of them. Ladies and gentlemen, it could have been your children. And there are still more than 130 hostages in the hands of Hamas. I had so hoped that I could have deleted this sentence from my speech today. Bring them home, now. The 7th of October was the day which changed everything for us Jewish people in the world. My everyday life here in Germany is defined since then by increased security measures, from increased anti-Semitic incidents, defined by fears and conversations that start with yes, but, or a silence that is resounding from the heart of the society. Since the 7th of October, my readings in schools have been cancelled because the schools said they couldn't ensure my safety. The last time I spoke in a school was with police protection. I know that I have passed on the trauma of the Shoah to my children and grandchildren, but that they should have these existential fears in their lives too is very painful to me. The Shoah did not begin with Auschwitz. It began with words. It began with silence and with society turning a blind eye. It pains me when schoolgoers are afraid to go to school now, only because they're Jewish. It pains me when my great-grandchildren have to be protected by police with machine guns, only because they're Jewish. I want remembrance days to not be the only days that we remember the Jewish people who were murdered by the Nazis. I want us to remember those who are alive today in their everyday lives. They need protection. I am horrified that right-wing extremist parties and far-right parties are being elected again. They cannot be allowed to become so strong that they endanger our democracy. And it's not far off that this happens. I would like society not to be silent when anti-Semitic statements are made around them. Because if you are silent, you are guilty as well of this. I would like to see students supporting fellow Jewish students when hostilities are expressed towards them. I am grateful that our government, directly after the 7th of October, expressed its solidarity with Israel and has supported the Jewish community in Germany. I feel protected by our democracy, at least so far. But I'm very, very worried, and I'm very sad to see what is happening on the streets of Germany. The willingness to express anti-Semitism on our streets. Why doesn't everybody protect our wonderful constitution and our democracy that we can live in? It is wonderful that in recent weeks so many people have demonstrated on the streets of Germany. To take a stand against right-wing extremism. However, I would wish that these demonstrators would also take a clear stand at work, at school, and among colleagues when anti-Semitic statements are made. I would like them to take a loud stand against this. I am very grateful that I know so many people who are combating anti-Semitism and pushing for mutual respect. I am grateful for all of the people who, since the 7th of October, have been there for us as Jewish people, often without many words. But why is it so few? I always say to the people I speak to, you are not to blame for what happened, but you do have a responsibility for what is happening now. I would like to see more humanity, more empathy, and I would like us all to be able to live in safety and peacefully here with one another. Mama, I thank you for sending me away just in the nick of time. How hard it must have been for you to do that, to send your 11-year-old daughter in this terrible time in Hungary. How hard it must have been. You were hoping I would survive. And here I am today, standing in the German Bundestag to give my testimony of what happened. It was never more important than it is today, because never again is now.
Ich danke Ihnen allen
I want to
für
thank
Ihre
all of
Aufmerksamkeit.
you for your attention.
That was Eva Szepesi, a Holocaust survivor, recounting very vividly her life story, the story of her time in the Auschwitz concentration camp and the life she lived after the liberation.